In the case of EACOP and maybe many other campaigns around the world, we often use very technical numbers like the 34 million tons of carbon dioxide emitted each year or 1,443 kilometers long of the pipeline, etc. But sharing testimonies off the front helps shows that it's actually people's lives that are at stake because of this project, that human beings are being threatened and are behind these big numbers that we use to raise awareness against the project, and that fighting against EACOP is most and foremost a matter of solidarity and joint responsibility towards humanity.
This is Beyond Crude, a Stop EACOP campaign podcast series that explores the economic, social, and governance impact in Uganda and Tanzania. And today we'll be focusing on the French activism and its impact on the EACOP campaign. And we are focusing on France because a significant number of the banks involved, a significant number of the organizations involved and corporations, including Total, are all based in Paris. And joining me today to discuss the next level of this and especially covering the legal aspects of this challenge will be Juliette, Soraya, Romain, and Isabelle. Would you introduce yourselves?
Hello, everyone. I'm Juliette Renaud. I'm a coordinator at Friends of the Earth France, Amis de la Terre France.
Welcome.
Hello, everyone. My name is Soraya Fiti. I'm Friends campaigner and organizer for 350.org.
Welcome.
Hi, everyone. My name is Roman, and I was part of the Stop EACOP campaign from London, originally fighting against insurance companies. And now I have the privilege to coordinate part of the Stop EACOP campaign from France.
Welcome, Roman.
And hello, everyone. I'm Isabelle Héritier. I'm a campaigner and organizer at the Sunrise Project in the Insure Our Future campaign, targeting mainly insurers to stop supporting fossil fuel projects.
Thank you. And just to get started, Juliette, can you walk us through the recent legal case filed in France against EACOP? What are the key arguments and what stood out?
So, in reality, we had two legal cases in France. First of all, we were alerted by several organizations in Uganda and also Friends of the Earth International about the human rights violation and environmental risk of the Tilenga and EACOP project in Uganda. So we started investigating with them and collecting testimonies in 2018, 2019, and we decided together, Friends of the Earth France and another French organization, Survie, together with 4 Ugandan organizations, AFIGO, NAPE, Crude, and Naboda, to file a first legal case in France. This was in 2019. It was the very first case using a new law in France that's called the Duty of Vigilance Law. And what's new with this law is that we can file a case against Total, the headquarters, the parent company, which is based in France, which is where we have the political and the economic power and where all the decisions are made. We can sue them in France for violation or environmental risk that happen in their activities elsewhere in the world, and that are activities mainly carried out through subsidiaries and subcontractors. So we started this first case, and unfortunately, as it was the very first case using this law, there was a lot of procedural questions that were raised by Total to try to kill the case, basically. But the same happened with other cases that were filed against other French transnational, as it was the very first year of this law. And so with this first case, we ended in, we had to go, first of all, up to the Supreme Court for a first procedural issue because they considered that we hadn't filed the case in the right court. And then the case went back to first instance and was declared inadmissible for another procedural question. So this was just 1 year ago. And so we decided to fight back, this time filing a bigger case, which is a case that is filed by 26 members of Ugandan affected communities, that are communities affected by Tilenga, so the oil extraction project, or EACOP, the pipeline. And we filed it with these community members, with Maxwell Atura as a human rights defender who have suffered a lot of threats and arrests, and again, together with three Ugandan organizations, FIGO, Tasha, and NAPE, which is a Friend of the Earth Uganda, and in France, Friend of the Earth France and Survey. So this new case was filed last year in June 2023, and it focuses on the human rights violations that are mostly linked to the land grabbing associated to the Tilenga and EACOP project. So it's important to remind that this project is affecting the land of more than 118,000 people in Uganda and Tanzania. And these people have been deprived from their livelihood for the right to use freely their land during more than 3 to 4 years for some of them without receiving any compensation. So they didn't have the right to continue cultivating their land freely. And at the same time, they didn't receive compensation. They were also pressured into signing the form to give up their land to Total, and they suffered a series of violations. That is why we sue Total in France using against this new law. And so what we hope, but it will take a long time because legal battles are always very long, is that Total will be recognized as responsible, as guilty of having caused this violation through their subsidiaries and subcontractors in Uganda, and that they would be condemned to pay compensation to the people that have been affected. So this is again mainly for the violation linked to the land grabbing, but also we want to hold Total accountable for all the violation of the rights of the human rights defenders. So being people that are like Maxwell, part of some civil society organization, or also community leaders that has just stood up for their rights, have been threatened, arrested several times, etc. And so even if it's, for instance, the Ugandan police that arrest these human rights defenders, there is a responsibility of Total under this new French law to prevent human rights violation associated to their project. And so the fact that these people are arrested because they are fighting against the project or just defending their rights that are violated because of Tilenga and EACOP, there is a responsibility of Total. They should, according to us, they should suspend the project or act to prevent this violation. This is, of course, very well known of Total that Uganda and Tanzania are governments that are not respecting the rights of their citizen, and that's where there is a lot of arbitrary arrest, repression of mobilization, etc. And so, according to this law, maybe they should just they shouldn't have chosen these countries to develop such a project, because there would be this kind of violation.
Yeah, interesting there, Juliette. Coming to you, Roman, I hope I got the pronunciation of your name right. Can you elaborate
Perfect.
on this successful collaboration between the French organizations and in the wider European Union organizations? What kind of collaboration has been going on to try and stop this EACOP project?
One thing I want to start with is to highlight that obviously, as French activists and French NGOs, there has been a driving force from those French activists to reach out to other activists in Europe, because TotalEnergies is a French company, and we are very strongly aware of how Total is responsible historically for a very big part of climate change and of numerous human rights violations. And I think that's why French activists have been reaching out to other European groups to tell them about, obviously, Total, and specifically about EACOP, and telling them about EACOP, and then also putting them in contact with activists in the field in Uganda and DRC, in Tanzania. And before going maybe in details with the specific examples of the successful fights from European activists, I wanted to highlight as well that it was very interesting as a successful strategy that each group in Europe, or activist groups all around the world, was quite independent, and the goal was for each group to really empower those groups to really seize the fight, stop EACOP. And I think something that of the Stop EACOP coalition, which was very successful, is that it has a very decentralized approach, and that activist groups are informed by resources from official reports by all activists on the ground, and then each group can find their own strategies on how to convince stakeholders which are very specific to their countries. And I think very interesting collaborations, going into details on the collaborations on activists in Europe. The first thing was to target the social license of TotalEnergies, because TotalEnergies is a big actor in France. There's TotalEnergies gas stations everywhere. And it's been very successful for all activist groups in the Netherlands, in Germany, and obviously in France to target those gas stations to really make the people, the civil society aware in France and in Europe that TotalEnergies is a very bad actor, and making them aware of all the human rights violations, of the responsibility in climate change. That's been one strategy, just to target Total's image in Europe. And then a second very successful strategy on the collaborations of European activists was really to target very specific stakeholders of EACOP and of TotalEnergies in Europe, to have very targeted approach to dismantle Total and to weaken Total, because Total can only work because there are so many other stakeholders that help Total. And those actors are the banks, the insurers, but also shareholders of Total and the suppliers of EACOP. And I'm just going to use some very successful examples, but there has been obviously the bank example of, for example, German activist groups really taking the subject and making many actions against German banks, such as Deutsche Bank, to drop EACOP. Then there has been the insurers group, and this has been a very big fight in London. And actually, it has been Isa, who is also on this podcast, who came to London activist groups saying that we have to take the fight because insurance is a very specific target that is going to make Total not being able to do EACOP, because without insurance, there's no project. And then there's obviously the shareholders of Total with like Danish groups who did many targeted approach to convince pension funds to withdraw all their funds from Total. And if Total loses more and more money because shareholders want to leave Total because of all the pressures from activists, it really weakens Total. And we had a very successful example of that with the pension fund PKA, which withdrew all his funds from Total just a few months ago, thanks to activist groups in Denmark. And I'm going to use one last example, which has been so successful, is that Isoplus, which was a supplier of the EACOP, an Austrian supplier of the EACOP, withdrew from the project thanks to the activist pressure from Fridays for Future Austria. And it really shows that having very close bonds between all those European actors to target very targeted stakeholders can really, really weaken Total and EACOP.
Thank you, Roman, for that. And I mean, just coming to you, Isa, what she's mentioned about, the withdrawal and the pressure on some of these French banks and insurance companies and the collaboration with the London and Danish activism, how much of a victory was the ability to get them to withdraw from this project? What's your assessment of that as a victory? And how did they go about, or how did the various players go about carrying out this advocacy efforts to get the French banks and insurance to withdraw from this project?
Yes, so the withdrawal from the banks and the insurers of the project has been very successful in creating basically delays on the viability and possibility of the project quite early on when it was proposed. And it's been led by a very strong collaboration of diverse actors coming from different countries coming together. So specifically on the wins that Roman is talking about around, the banks, the insurers, the financiers, the coordination, of the efforts have been really led by the local groups in Uganda and the coalition, but then amazing groups like Friends of the Earth, which Juliette works with, Reclaim, Banktrack, Inclusive Development, Ensure Our Future, 350, Chile, many groups came together to basically fight against the impunity of the financial and economic actors to make sure that these institutions that would be potentially involved in the projects were being held responsible for the misbehaviors of the companies that are developing the project. Here we're talking about Total and Chinook. And it's been really quite impressive success because basically the project has been delayed for over 4 years. And I think that's definitely because of multiple different approaches and strategies, including the legal cases that I think Juliette will talk more about. But it's been also because of the withdrawals of many banks and insurance companies and financiers that decided to stay away from the project. And that's been, possible because of many different tactics that have been put in place, including at the beginning in 2020, an open letter calling on banks not to support the EACOP project, signed by over 2,060 groups from 49 countries, including around 120 African-based organizations, to talk about the threats and the impacts of the project on local communities, water supplies, ecosystems, ecosystem, biodiversity, climate. There's been multiple reports explaining, throughout the years, the different risks and problematics of the project, making it, too risky to support. Also bringing, the voice of the most concerned people on the ground here, Ugandans and Tanzanians, to the table to negotiate with the financiers and potential financiers. And also then, shareholder activism, bringing, these voices to the shareholders and these demands to the shareholders during the AGM season, basically making the project so controversial that it's, not worth it to support, and really showcasing the alternatives that were advocated by the local groups in Uganda as other alternatives to oil development for the development of the economical, benefits for the country and local communities. So definitely, this combination of multiple tactics, multiple groups coming together, collective international effort has really brought, a lot of elements to be able to block the project from moving ahead. And I think is really a showcase that this can be reproduced in the future on other fights as well. And it's a big political slap to Total.
Thank you for that. Coming to Soraya, Isabel mentioned multiple tactics in terms of the ability to, get the right concern around this project. One of the tactics, of course, is digital tools and the online campaigns. Tell us more about that. How did that front look like in terms of advocacy?
Sure. Digital tactics come hand in hand with offline tactics and direct actions to maximize our impact. Some of the digital tools we use, it depends on the outputs expected. For example, one low engagement tool we often use is petition or even open letters, as Isabel mentioned just before. It's easy to get a lot of people to sign on them and an effective way to show support for our demands. With them, we gather large support for a specific ask and show our target that a lot of people agree with our demands and thus build pressure on them. For example, last year, we addressed an open letter to Philippe Brassac, who's the CEO of Crude and Crude Agricole is the main funder of TotalEnergies, and it enables the company to continue destroying the climate through its money flows. So this letter was public and got a lot of attention from our supporters, and once signed, it was directly sent to the email address of Philippe Brassac. And this, plus our mobilization on the ground and coordinated efforts from different civil society organizations, led to Philippe Brassac responding to us and posting his position against the climate-killing projects on his LinkedIn page, which was a first in his case. Speaking of LinkedIn, another tactic that we use are social media storms. We prepare key messages with our demands that people can easily repost on different social media platforms and have a common hashtag, the Stop Pickup hashtag or the Stop Total ones, to gather all of them under one name and show a unified tactic. On Twitter, you have a lot of journalists, for example. So putting the hashtag in trending with our key messages will help media outreach and increase media attention on the demands we are trying to showcase. On Instagram, it's a bit different. We have different audiences there, so it will help us raise awareness among a general public and gather more support for our demands and the campaign. This is done regularly via the Stop Pickup social media page, for example, or the supports of different content creators. And on LinkedIn, it's again a bit more different. It's more useful to push them, to push our targets to make a public statement or to endanger their peer-to-peer reputation, as it is a very corporate platform where their peers see their content. So usually we tailor our demands and messages a bit differently when it comes to LinkedIn, and the output is different. And one thing that we did also for the Stop Pickup campaign and that we continue doing are Twitter storm. Last year or 2 years ago, we hijacked the hashtag used by our targets to announce their profit announcement. So it made it unavoidable for finance journalists waiting for Total's profits announcement, for example, and also their peers unavoidable for our demands. They could not see our demands and key messages, because when clicking on their hashtag, you could only see our messages and our demands and our tweets. And so this helped us reach an audience outside of our own usual activist bubble. And I would say another creative tool that we use and that is quite effective is partnering with content creators. And by doing this kind of partnerships, it helps us disseminate our message on the different platforms and widen our audience. So people who are not usually very active maybe on the climate struggle topic might be more sensitive to anti-racism or decolonial topics, and so would join in the fight via these other platforms. So by getting influencers involved in the campaign, it helps us widen our reach, reach new audiences from different movement struggle, and even get new people into the mobilization. And this is what happened with the Stop Total groups.
Thank you for that. And I mean, coming back to you, Juliette, the Friends of the Earth in France prepared an annual investigation report on the EACOP project. What were the key highlights from the report, and what has been the build-up since the report came out?
So thank you. Just maybe to start saying that, as I said, our main tool against the project was the filing this lawsuit. But before that, legal tool was not like our main way of acting as an organization, and we are mainly using advocacy, citizen mobilization, media campaign, investigation, etc. So that's what we have more experience in. And but we decided that, of course, for the legal action, we needed to investigate, to gather evidence, to gather testimonies from the affected communities, to gather also analyze expert research, etc., about both human rights and environmental risk. And so what we decided when we did this in 2019, the first field research that was focused on Tilenga, but with also some desk research, as I said, on more expert analysis on the environmental risk, etc. We needed that to file the case, but we decided to publish our report when we filed the case. And this way, the help like reveal the case in France, because you have to go back in 2019. No one in France had ever heard about EACOP, Tilenga, and that Total had any project in Uganda and Tanzania. So we had this first report as a reveal. It got a lot of media attention, and it also showed that we had like strong evidence against Total. And also we had a website and a petition to call people to support the lawsuit. And so they also could get like a summary of the main facts through the report. And then the year after, we were again in court, in appeal against Total. And what we needed from, as I said, we were like stuck in procedural issue about what was the right court to go to. But as the violation and the land grabbing was advancing on the ground, because when we started, there were like a few thousand people that were concerned. And while we were advancing, as I said, we got to more than 100,000 people that were affected in both Tanzania and Uganda. So in 2020, we did a new field research. When I say we, that we designed the research, but the research was done by partners in Uganda, researchers in Uganda. And we had new evidence to show that the violations were expanding. And so again, we decided to, and this second report was quite important, was called like a nightmare called Total. And again, it helped like bring media attention to this project, like 1 year after we filed the case, and show that things were worsening on the ground. Then the year after, we were still stuck fighting in the Supreme Court, and we were waiting for this all very technical and procedural issue to resolve. And we learned that the French government would maybe give financial support to the project through what's called an export credit guarantee. So we decided to change the focus for this year, for 2021, and together with other organizations and citizens that had started to mobilize against EACOP, we targeted Macron and the French government for the complicity with the project. And so in October 2021, we released a new report really focused on that to show how both in France, but also through the French embassy in Uganda, the French state was supporting Total. But also we explain how come, and it is mainly because Total has infiltrated the French state for many years already. For instance, through what's called revolving door. It is the fact that you have people coming back and forth between the government or high-level position in the French state, and then they go to work for Total and vice versa. And so this links between the French government, the French state, and Total gives a lot of benefit to Total. And in Uganda, the embassy is really doing a lot of communication, also supporting the project and negotiating with the Ugandan government and helping Total in its greenwashing. so it added like a new angle to the story, I would say, because it's a story for media and you need to keep the attention. And this investigation was important because we managed to prevent the government from giving this financial support to EACOP and to highlight also the role that it was playing. And up to Macron, who was also had wrote a letter to the Ugandan president, about the project and the opportunity of cooperation. And finally, in 2022, again, we were back in court and we decided to do a field investigation in Tanzania. This was the very first that was done there, very difficult, even more difficult than in Uganda. And we were a bit worried, actually. We were saying, okay, it's horrible, but basically what's happening in Tanzania is more or less what people already knew that's happening in Uganda, and maybe they are tired and the media won't be interested about that. But in fact, we also highlighted all the environmental risk in Tanzania, also with the oil ports that will be built by Total, and the risk of tsunami and other risk. And in fact, this report was again very successful in putting back media attention and putting back pressure on Total. And so all this investigation is important, as I said, not only for the court case, because we need all this evidence, but also it was feeding the journalists and also feeding other organizations, for instance, all of those that are targeting the insurers or the banks, etc. The fact that there is a legal case is an argument that can be used, but also all the fact that we gather from the ground, all the investigation and evidence are also used by other organizations. And so it's how you articulate the different tools that you had to maintain the pressure. And this help also grow the mobilization against the project. And finally, as you may know, even Total CEO has recognized that EACOP now is the symbol of the anti-oil fight worldwide.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, interesting on that. You mentioned tools, and coming to you, Romain, assuming it's my first interaction with this whole EACOP project, where do I start? What tools do I use to enlighten myself, and where do I plug in?
Well, I think there are several things that you can do. First thing, I would say reach out to very just established NGOs, because those are mainly everywhere. They're in many parts of the world. And I think obviously at 350 Africa, but also there is in France, in New York, I mean, in a lot of countries in the world, but also very established grassroots movements. And I think very obviously at Fridays for Future, at Extinction Rebellion as well. And they're also very active in so many cities. So they're probably in your city as well. Second thing I would say is to just reach out to the social medias of Stop EACOP, where it could be the Instagram, the Twitter, or the LinkedIn account of Stop EACOP, because those accounts are managed by people who are working very closely with them and in the Stop EACOP coalition. So I think it's a very great way. If you don't know where to start, just drop a message saying, I want to do something to Stop EACOP, and you will be linked to someone relevant or someone in your city, and you can start taking action. And last advice I would say is that usually it's and especially if you're not in a climate group already, it's hard to know when to have an impact, where to take action. And basically we should take action all the time, and at all times we should take this fight against EACOP. But sometimes when we're alone, it's hard to know when is the best time and when put our capacity at the most efficient time. And I think something that has worked very well in the Stop EACOP coalition is really leveraging international collaborations on specific momentums. So I think if you want to get involved, really stay tuned at those international momentums. And I think about very specific examples of over the last year that have worked so well, of showing that actually if you put international groups that all take action and in dozens of cities in the world together, it really shows that people power is really, really strong. And I think obviously of the International Day of Action in February 2023, where dozens of cities and activists in the world took action to convince the banks, Standard Bank, SMBC, and Standard Chartered to drop EACOP. And it had been really, really incredible to see that it actually worked, because a few months later, SMBC, which was also a financial advisor of EACOP, and Standard Chartered dropped EACOP. So it was really, really motivating. Then another example was the International Day of Action action in November 2023, where activists all around the world were in solidarity with the people on the ground in Uganda and Tanzania to call the Chinese stakeholders, China Exim Bank and the insurer Sinosure to not insure EACOP. And it has also worked because for now, Sinosure has really delayed the moment where they'll say their decision on if they will insure EACOP or not. And obviously the incredible momentum of the Global Week of Action to call on insurance companies to stop insuring new fossil fuel projects, because now another company, Probitas, has said that they wouldn't insure EACOP, and another insurer, Zurich, who had also said that they already said they wouldn't insure EACOP, but now they've ruled out all new fossil fuel projects. So it's just amazing. So if you want to start and get involved, really stay tuned on this international momentum and come join us. We need you, really.
Yeah, thank you. That's very insightful and a good guidance in there. And, just thinking about it, you mentioned CNBC. There's these French banks who pulled back, the insurance companies have pulled back, financial advisors have pulled back. I mean, coming to you, Issa, can we say we finally cracked method or a model of compelling these institutions to stop participating in environmentally damaging projects?
I think we can say that, yes, definitely. And it's a model that's already being reproduced on other fights against big, major fossil fuel projects around the world, in Africa and elsewhere as well. With the main objective around all of this is to make the companies, not only the companies that are developing the project, but also the financiers that are, involved in supporting those projects to move ahead, to make them accountable for the harms to the people and the environment, and make sure that their activities are basically aligned with the policies, and that their policies respect, robust human rights, local communities, and the ecosystems and the climate. So I think in the EACOP fight, there's been a lot of different strategies, tactics, and approach, both, around legal elements, public pressure, reputational, reputation of these corporations, the reports and everything that made it that, these companies, these corporations, the financial actors were forced to be held, accountable for their activities, and made it much more difficult for them to do, the classic greenwashing, or to basically not align their activities with what they say they, are proud of doing on the climate or social side. And I know that there's also major, laws that are being fought for by different groups and movements across the world at the European level, but also at the UN level. Juliette is involved in that, to hold basically corporations accountable and have that written in the law around corporate sustainability due diligence directives and similar initiatives. So I think definitely the model that has been posed, on the EACOP campaign can be reproduced on other fights, but also hopefully will be embedded in the laws moving forward to hold companies accountable.
Yeah, thank you. And I mean, speaking of holding companies accountable, Soraya, just coming to you, the kind of collaboration we've seen with the French activists to try and highlight this matter. What kind of, collaboration do you see both within France but also outside of France, given that this project affects Uganda and Tanzania in terms of the construction, but the financiers are all across Europe and as far as China? So what kind of a collaboration do you see among the activists to try and stop this project?
I think the collaboration I've witnessed for the past 2 years and that have made this campaign now a mainstream one among the general public are all very complementary. All the different activists, all the different organizations involved in the campaign, all bring in their own expertise and their own way of fighting the fight, and coordinating all these things all together under the Stop EACOP banner made it into an impactful campaign. For online activists, for example, Roman mentioned it just before. One way that we gather all together is Global Day of Actions. So we coordinate our efforts to maximize our impact on specific targets during these days. And during these Global Days of Actions, our supporters gather with us from around the world to put pressure on specific targets like SMBC or Standard Chartered. And during these mobilizations, we coordinate all together to post during a similar time slot, targeting the same companies and pointing fingers at them publicly without them written and very clearly. So this shows shows the target that the pressure is coming from all around the world and how large the movement is and how strong it is. And so this large support for the campaign shows a big opposition that might endanger their reputation, which often case can lead the targets to drop the EACOP project or change their positions towards it. So it's one tactic that we use, but there are so many others. Advocacy, as mentioned by Juliette, offline mobilization. Another tool that we use in this coalition are webinars, public events. So webinars, for example, are super helpful way to show a diverse expertise to the general public. We use them to educate them and raise awareness on the danger of the project. And gathering all these different views from different regions of the world is, again, super helpful to show that there is a large front against this project. It's not only people from the north trying to impose their practice and preventing a project to exist, and it's not only frontliners fighting the project. It's a very diverse community wanting to join in solidarity against a project that is both harmful to humanity, but also biodiversity and the climate in general. And these kind of events and these kind of collaborations are also super helpful for us in France to broadcast and showcase the voices of the frontliners, of the most impacted by this project. So joint social media campaigns or coordinated messaging across platforms is useful for frontliners' personal testimonies to be disseminated. It helps give a face to the fight. It creates bonds between humans from different cultures, and it humanizes the campaign. In the case of EACOP and many other campaigns around the world, we often use very technical numbers like the 34 million tons of carbon dioxide emitted each year, or 1,443 kilometers long of the pipeline, etc. But sharing testimonies of the front shows that it's actually people's lives that are at stake because of this project, that human beings are being threatened and are behind these big numbers that we use to raise awareness against the project, and that fighting against EACOP is most and foremost a matter of solidarity and joint responsibility towards humanity.
Speaking of solidarity, Juliette, just coming to you, I wanted to speak to a specific event or set of events, which is the widespread disobedience action in France during Total's AGM. How was that? When was it? What did the disobedience aim to achieve, and what do you think came of that?
Yeah, so it came from two experiences, I would say. Like for a year, we've been using the AGM, so the general meeting of Total shareholder each year, and also AGM of banks, for instance, to like a hook. And for many years, we had like one share of Total to be able to enter the AGM and ask questions and disturb inside the AGM, because you can ask a question directly to the CEO. But a couple of years ago, together with Greenpeace and other organizations like EACOP, which is a mobilization organization that is affiliated to Friends of the Earth France, we decided to go much bigger, as we were many organizations mobilizing against Total. And for France, we have also a long experience of mass civil disobedience action, which are action gathering several hundreds of people at the same time in one place, and that are, of course, non-violent. And so this time in 2022, we decided to block the AGM, so to prevent them from holding it. And so it was a success, as we were 250 activists in front of the building, and we managed to block the entrance. And after several hours of blocking it, the Total decided to hold the AGM online. So we managed them to postpone the meeting and then to hold it only online. So many shareholders couldn't enter the place, and there were only a few of them that had managed to go through another door, which was so it was a big success. At the time, we were highlighting not only EACOP but also all the main fossil fuel expansion projects of Total. So also their gas project in Mozambique. We are also asking them to withdraw from Russia because it was a few months after the start of the war in Ukraine, and so we really mobilized through the same behind the same slogan that we want to end fossil fuel and we want Total to withdraw from all these different countries, highlighting also the complicity of Total with dictatorship or authoritarian government. And then the following year, so last year, we decided to go again and to organize mass civil disobedience action. This time we were 700 activists, so at least almost three times more than the year before. This action was much more difficult because there was very heavy police repression with tear gas just directly on the activists that were just sitting pacifically on the ground. And what was crazy on that day is that anyway we managed to have a lot of media coverage and also reaction from the government. And so you have basically, we managed to create a division within the government. As I said, the ministry, they sent like a lot of police. So the what's called the Interior Ministry, the Home State Ministry, like sent a lot of police to suppress the mobilization. But at the same time, the Prime Minister said that activists, like climate activists, were legitimate in having such action. And the Minister of Energy Transition said that we were right to point out that Total needed to change track and to phase away fossil fuels. So it's very important action because it shows like the balance of power that we can and the pressure that we can put to Total really at the heart of their power, because it's when they are holding their shareholder meeting. And already I also, it's not a civil disobedience action, but already the year before 2021 it was an online AGM, and just 2 days before Maxwell Atura, so Ugandan activist, had been arrested in Uganda. And this time we managed to have a very huge online mobilization to ask for his release, but also to put pressure on Total to condemn this situation. And with this online mobilization, that was also at the time of the AGM, and it was possible to ask a question online. We have activists from all over the world asking the same question: will you condemn the illegal arrest of Maxwell Atura in Uganda, and what will you do to stop that? And actually Total CEO spoke about that during the AGM, which is something that we've never seen if we are not directly there.
Yeah, I mean, interesting progress there. But then when you think about it, we are getting the French, both the corporate and the financial machinery, to pull away from this project. But then a new challenge has emerged, which is the Chinese muscle are willing to step in there. Romain, coming to you, what advice do you have for this new phase where we'll be facing the old challenge but with the new names and new logos?
Well, I think the most important advice that I have is really to amplify the voices of the activists and of the people affected by the project on the ground. And as everyone said, by digital tactics, by taking actions in our own countries in solidarity, and to amplify that, but also digital actions to call out journalists on social media and really show that it's the people on the ground who show the effects of the EACOP project on the people on the ground, and show that we're amplifying those voices, and to show the Chinese actors that it's really the people in Uganda, in Tanzania, who are affected by the projects and who don't want this oil to be exported internationally and for this pipeline to be built.
Yeah, I mean, interesting there. And then just coming to you, Issa, on this, in terms of the next steps, there's been victory secured, but the journey still is quite a bit going forward. What do you envision as the next steps for the players and the stakeholders involved in this?
Yeah, I mean, the next steps is really to continue that strong dynamic of keeping the opposition strong against the project and showing the alternatives that exist for local communities and the economic and energetic developments. So definitely the campaign targeting the Asian actors is going to be in development. So people listening to us can keep an eye on. There'll be probably, international moments to be involved in. There's also the legal cases that are ongoing, and the digital pressures, the activism and the advocacy on the financial actors is still absolutely key, because the project hasn't secured financial close. So they don't have the necessary elements to move forward yet. So the more we're able to get commitments, the more we're able to delay the project, make it more complicated to move forward. So definitely the fight is still on, and there's multiple ways in which, people that are listening to us can get involved. And I think one of the main thing that also is good for us to do is to really show that it's not only, local communities or groups that are against, fossil fuels. It's also because we're, for another types of, human and economical and environmental development that's good for local communities, that's good in respect of human rights, and that's good for the energy access locally and for the energy transition. So there's also other models of projects that would be much more beneficial for the countries and the climate that are not, the continuation of fossil fuel exploitation and fossil fuel developments. So I think we're really, this fight is emblematic of a much wider and big fight to really get our economic systems and countries, away from fossil fuels and to the next new paradigm that's better for humans and the planet.
Yeah, thank you for that. And coming to you, Juliette, working from France, dealing with, the communities within France, but also the people on the ground. I would like for you, and this one is a fairly open question, to highlight an individual story, even without a name, just an individual who's been affected by this and how they've been able to challenge it through your help. People who are on the ground, the fisher folk and the families affected. Just one instance or one story that stood out for you.
I think what one important moment was at the very beginning. So when we had the first court hearing in France, two community members came to France. And besides going to court, where it was a bit frustrating because the judge didn't allow them to speak, only the lawyers could speak, we also organized a set of meetings, and we had a meeting with French members of parliament. And among them, there was Dominique Potier, who is the French MP who put forward this law that we were using for the for this lawsuit. And actually, he's a farmer, and so there was a strong connection between, he totally really understood the fight of this and of these farmers in Uganda. It was very a strong connection, and I think connecting what happened to the people in Uganda, the violation they suffered, to the reality also that exists in France, and the challenge that can also face small farmers in France, can also help people mobilize in solidarity with them. And so these two people that came to France in 2019, Ugandan community member, they are part of this new legal action, and one of them came again in 2023 when we filed a new action, and so we have a very strong connection in this fight. And we also have a very important moments that were very difficult for them when they were threatened, arrested, or sometimes we had to move them to a safe place. And so we have now a very several years of being together in that, but of course it's for them the toughest part, and I really I always I'm amazed by the courage that they have to continue the fight. And so of course we are there for them, inclusive at the distance.
Yeah, thank you for that admirable bravery from those who have to live through these experiences on the ground and have to deal with its impact directly. I don't know if Soraya, Romain, Isa, anyone of you has a similar experience, especially on the Tanzanian side, the port at Tanga, or along that entire stretch. Any you can think of that just stood out for you in terms of the individual stories, or stories of groups on the ground who are standing up to this EACOP campaign. Do you have an instance of a story or an incident or an idea from your interactions with people on the ground that stood out for you in this journey?
Personally, first it was with the delegation of Ugandan activists who came in France in 2022. It was my first real encounter with people directly impacted or working on the Stop EACOP campaign and against the EACOP pipeline, and getting to work with them, seeing how fierce their fight was and how brave they were and how, inspired they were. It got me really want to be involved in this fight. And it was the case for 1 year, 1.5 years, where we got to share their testimonies. We got to speak about the project. We got to do media interviews about it, to disseminate as much as possible their fights. And then from this collaboration, from these testimonies, something else sparked in France, and it was the Stop Total mobilization. So from their fights and from the stories they brought from Uganda and Tanzania to France, a new generation of young activists decided to come on the ground and also face the project, fight against it, and more broadly fight against Total and their harmful projects. And so the Stop Total groups first sparked in Paris, and with 350 and the task force, the Stop EACOP task force, we helped structure them and train them. But from this moment, then they grew from themselves, and they created their own tactics. They did amazing things on the ground, wanting to support people they actually never met. Even fighting in the most creative ways. Sometimes they would use civil disobedience, as they understood how much of a privilege it was for them to be able to use this as a tactic in their fights. And other times they would create other very creative stunts, or directly go to banks' offices, drop letters, speak with our targets, have banners in front of their AGMs. Their energy never dropped. They would always, every day, find new ways to embody this fight and support frontliners. And so these collaborations and witnessing how the testimonies from people they again actually never met, except for a few of them, sparked such a fierce need for justice and solidarity. Really inspired me a lot.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Juliette. Thank you, Soraya. Thank you, Issa. Thank you, Romain. This was insightful. This is very, very helpful for our audiences. And all from the Stop EACOP campaign, you can say, always a pleasure. You can catch this conversation on Spotify, SoundCloud, and follow us on social media at Stop EACOP.